Hello folks, it's Kelly Van Houten again. This is another Goldilocks narrative cold case research. So this is the Goldilocks narrative as applied to true crime. The Goldilocks narrative analysis of the case of Johnny Gosch. The initial focus was on Johnny Gosch. That was the motivation here. This is another one of those cases that has a lot of information out there but is unsolved. These are ideal for this kind of analysis. And also because there are other cases that are probably tied to it, which also makes it easier. More information, the better. So, the Iowa-Nebraska Paperboy Cluster. Missing and Murdered Boys of the American Heartland, 1982 to 1989. Before we get started, I'm going to mention Jacob Wetterlin, who many thought was somehow tied to the perpetrator who kidnapped Johnny Gosch. But we found out later that that perpetrator was found. He is in federal prison, I believe, now. And Jacob Wetterlin did not survive. But it appears to be unrelated to this. Prepared by Kelly Van Houten, Goldilocks Narrative Cold Case Research. I repeat myself. Analytical updates. This is just, an update note of the document. We don't really need to go through that. The Goldilocks Narrative, TGN, is a proprietary analytical methodology developed by Kelly Van Houten. It evaluates competing explanatory theories for cold cases through three structural pillars rooted in Occam's razor. A note on methodology, human insight, and AI-assisted research. This document is produced through a specific analytical model. Postulation by Kelly Van Houten, falsification by Claude. The roles are deliberately separated. Kelly Van Houten forms a postulate privately before asking any question. Questions are posed in a way that does not reveal the postulate, so that Claude's responses are drawn from the evidence rather than shaped by the hypothesis being tested. Claude retrieves the relevant evidence, attempts to falsify the postulate, and flags where claims need to be retracted or qualified. If the postulate survives falsification, it is incorporated into the analytical framework. If it is falsified, it is revised or discarded. The process repeats iteratively until a theory of the case emerges. The theory of the case is the endpoint, the most probable narrative of events, built in sufficient detail to identify or characterize a perpetrator, based on the evidence that survives the falsification process. Each iteration, each question, each postulate tested moves the analysis one step closer to that endpoint. This model compresses what would otherwise require dozens of hours of manual research and iterative document drafting into a focused analytical session. It does not replace human judgment, the identification of what to investigate, what patterns to pursue, when the balance of probability has shifted, and what constitutes an acceptable theory of the case. These are Kelly Van Houten's throughout. What AI provides is research speed, breadth of retrieval, systematic falsification support, and document construction. The product is an analysis that reflects both human analytical insight driving the inquiry and artificial intelligence research capacity executing it. Noreen Gosch, the mother of Johnny Gosch, is alive in her early 80s and still making public appearances as of 2025. She remains the most important living witness in the case and the custodian of the audio tape of Soda's prediction. We're going to talk a lot about that. That tape, if it still exists, is the single most important piece of physical evidence in the Iowa cluster. It needs to be put on the internet, publicized, if it's not already out there. That would be huge. At that point, I would be pretty confident in saying we know what happened. For that and many other reasons that we're going to go through. Goldilocks narrative analytical pillars, evidence economy. The preferred theory must account for the greatest number of verified evidentiary facts using the fewest unsupported inferential steps. Causal parsimony. of competing theories that explain the same facts, the theory with the simplest causal chain is preferred. Complexity must be evidence warranted. Chronological integrity. The preferred theory must be fully consistent with the confirmed timeline. Theories that require reordering or suppression of temporally anchored evidence fail this pillar regardless of other merits. Evidentiary source discipline. This analysis applies strict source discipline. All analytical conclusions are grounded in independently verifiable facts. Court records, autopsy findings, law enforcement documentation, confirmed obituary data, and corroborated witness accounts. Where specific claims cannot be independently corroborated through these sources, they are noted as unverified and flagged for further investigation, rather than used as primary evidence. Paul Bonacci's testimony is similarly treated, noted where relevant but not used as a primary evidentiary foundation. The Goldilocks narrative does not diminish the role of any individual in bringing these cases to public attention, or in advocating for the victims and their families. Part 2, the two-cluster framework. The central analytical finding of this document, reached through iterative Goldilocks narrative evaluation, is that the 5 cases in this study represent 2 separate predatory series operated by 2 different perpetrators, sharing geographic proximity and victim type overlap, but diverging fundamentally in operational methodology, outcome signature, and perpetrator profile. And here are the 5 we're going to be looking at. Now, we were able to remove 2 of these pretty quickly. This is the Danny Joe Eberl, I think? Not sure how you pronounce that. Christopher Walden. These looked like they could be part of this cluster, but it turns out they're probably not, because we'll see why in a minute. But they were definitely committed by someone else. So the real cluster we're going to end up distilling this down to is going to be Johnny Gosch, Eugene Martin, and Mark Allen. We're going to use all 3 cases to pull in as much information as possible for the Goldilocks narrative. Why the clusters are separate? Yeah. The 2-cluster framework is supported by 3 independent lines of evidence: geographic custodial impossibility, methodological divergence, and outcome signature divergence. Geographic and custodial impossibility. John Joubert, the confirmed Nebraska perpetrator, is conclusively excluded from all 3 Iowa disappearances on the basis of his documented location at the time of each event. I think it was really 2, but in September 1982, Joubert was in Portland, Maine, where he murdered Ricky Stetson weeks before Gosch disappeared. By January 1984, he was in custody of Nebraska. By August 1984 and March 1986, he was incarcerated on death row. He could not have committed the Iowa abductions under any scenario consistent with the factual record. Methodological divergence. Joubert's confirmed operational signature is markedly different from the Iowa perpetrators. Joubert acted impulsively. This is key. Used a knife immediately. Left bodies within miles of abduction sites. Produced physical evidence, rope, bite marks, tire impressions, and was caught within months of his second murder. The Iowa perpetrator left no physical evidence across 3 abductions spanning 4 years. No bodies have ever been recovered. Victims were seen in friendly, non-threatening conversation with an adult male before vanishing. And the series remained operationally active for at least 7 years based on the 1986 to 1989 satellite incidents. The paper route culture factor. The geographic proximity of the 2 clusters, approximately 120 miles apart, is less analytically significant than it initially appears. The Des Moines Register and Omaha World Herald both operated extensive child carrier networks throughout Iowa and Nebraska in the early 1980s. The pre-dawn Sunday morning delivery window, boys alone, predictable routes, minimal witnesses, was a structural vulnerability that existed across the Midwest corridor and was by no means regionally exclusive. Child carrier delivery was a widespread national institutional practice during this era, as documented in cases around the country, including Idaho in the 1990s. Two independent predators recognizing and exploiting the same victim type opportunity in adjacent states is not improbable given the density of that opportunity in this specific region. The proximity is notable, but not evidence of connection. Goldilocks narrative finding, two-cluster framework. The Iowa cluster, Gosch, Martin, and Allen, and the Nebraska cluster, Eberl and Walden, represent two independent predatory series. The Nebraska cluster is closed. Jubert convicted and executed 1996. The Iowa cluster remains open. All further analysis in this document focuses on the Iowa cluster. The Nebraska cluster is retained as a behavioral baseline only. The Iowa cluster. Individual case profiles. The three Iowa cases share a geographic radius of 3.8 miles. So these were all very close, guys. A victim profile of male paperboys aged 12 to 13, and a complete absence of physical evidence or recovered remains across all three disappearances spanning 4 years. They are analyzed here as a probable single perpetrator series. Case 1, Johnny Gosch, West Des Moines, Iowa, September 5, 1982. Here's the background information on this boy here. We have anything, that might be relevant in the discussion you can find here. You can just pause or go back to this if you need. All right, so Johnny Gosch. Johnny left home at approximately 5:45 a.m. without waking his father, who customarily accompanied him on Sunday routes due to heavier paper loads. I've heard different accounts, but it's not really material here, I don't think. But I have heard that the father just didn't want to do it and just stayed in bed. I don't know. Doesn't really matter, though, to the outcome. What matters to the outcome is that he wasn't there. So either way, in this scenario, he would have not been there. Multiple witnesses at the paper drop observed him in conversation with a stocky man in a blue two-tone car. Witness John Rossi noted something seemed strange and recalled a partial license plate under subsequent hypnosis, indicating a Warren County, Iowa plate. As Johnny proceeded north to begin his route, another carrier observed him being followed by a man on foot. A neighbor reported hearing a car door slam and observing a silver Ford Fairmont accelerate northbound. Johnny's wagon was found 2 blocks from his home, fully loaded with undelivered papers. He has never been found. Key evidentiary elements. Witness descriptions. Stocky man. Blue two-toned car, variously described as a Ford Fairmont. Separate silver Ford Fairmont seen departing at speed. Warren County partial plate, recalled under hypnosis, never conclusively matched to a vehicle. Directions ruse. Suspect engaged multiple boys asking for directions, consistent with reconnaissance of the drop site. No physical evidence recovered at any point in the 40-plus year investigation. So we have not a scrap. 1986, 15-year-old Jim Pollock, registered carrier, grabbed by unknown male half a mile from Gosch wagon site. Pollock escaped. This is important, guys. I think we'll get into this more, but I think this is the same person. We'll look at the dates here in a minute, but I don't know if this was... Let me have a look here real quick, because this actually just occurred to me when I was reading it. Let me go back and look at something real quick. I may have missed something here originally in this narrative. We have Mark Allen was March 29, 1986. March 29, 1986. Okay. Doesn't say what month. This Pollock guy, the abduction of Jim Pollock was attempted in 1986. We don't have the month. The Mark Allen case was in March of that same year. That's something I'm going to look into, and I'll update this. I would suspect this was the same guy, but I don't really. I want to see what the dates are first. This would explain why he stopped too. If he failed to get this guy, that's what occurred to me. Okay, Eugene Martin, Des Moines, Iowa, August 12, 1984. Information on his case. 1984, age 13, approximately 5 to 5:30 a.m. Same Des Moines register. Also a Boy Scout, just like Johnny and just like Mark Allen. All three of those were Boy Scouts. I don't know if that was known all this time. It may have come. Some of that may have come out recently, but we know now that all three of them were Boy Scouts. Status: open, cold, no arrests, presumed deceased by authorities. Eugene disappeared 43 days after the Johnny Gosch law was signed into Iowa statute. The law's first real-world test. He went alone that morning, his stepbrother absent, wanting to earn extra money before the Iowa State Fair. Multiple witnesses reported seeing him in friendly conversation with a clean-cut man in his 30s at his paper pickup corner between 5 and 5:15 a.m. His paper bag was found with undelivered papers at Southwest 14th and Highview Streets. He has never been found. Detective James Raleigh of the Des Moines PD Police Department estimates he pursued between 2,000 and 3,000 leads, traveling as far as Mexico and Canada without producing a single credible result. When I hear this, law enforcement says this a lot, and it's nothing, it's not to disparage law enforcement, but this kind of thing about, when they talk about volume of effort doesn't impress me at all. What matters is the quality of the effort. They could have had 30,000 leads, but if the leads are worthless, it doesn't really matter. None of them are useful. Key evidentiary elements: structural congruence with Gosch, same employer, same day of week, same pre-dawn window, same friendly conversation approach, same abandoned papers, same complete evidentiary vacuum. Witness description of suspect: clean cut, apparent 30s, friendly demeanor, consistent with the Gosch witness description of a non-threatening adult male. Eugene's father, Donald Martin, believed his son was too shy to approach a stranger voluntarily. It had to be somebody Gene could trust. This is going to come up later, guys. We're just following the evidence. Okay, it had to be somebody Gene could trust. No physical evidence, no bone fragment, no trace of Eugene has ever been found. Donald Martin died in 2010 without resolution. His parents are deceased. That really sucks. Case 3, Mark Allen, Des Moines, Iowa, March 29, 1986, age 13. Date missing, March 29, 1986, on a Saturday, the day before Easter. Time, evening hours, 1409 Southwest Emma Avenue. I think somewhere in here we've got a map, and when we pull that map out, it's going to be a little stunning when you see all these locations. But here's the information we have for Mark Allen. Okay, so if you need to look at that, just pause or move back. Distance from Gosch, 3.3 miles. Distance from Martin, 0.9 miles. But the funny thing is these are much closer to a fourth party we're going to be talking about later. Very close. Boy Scout confirmed. Mark was an active duty Boy Scout at the time of his disappearance. That was on the Unfound podcast, sourced from Family Interview with Brother Chris. Open, reclassified from runaway to abduction. The image below shows the Allen family home at 1408 Southwest Emma Avenue, Des Moines, Iowa, confirmed by Google Street View. This is the house, if it is not a reconstruction, that's a long time ago. This is the house Mark Allen walked east from on the evening of March 29, 1986. Samuel Sodas, confirmed 1985 address at 1403 Southwest Emma Avenue. is 5 house numbers west of the same block. Let me read this again, because this is going to dovetail in with a whole lot of other details. We're going to get a really good Goldilocks narrative here. This is the house Mark Allen walked east from on the evening of March 29, 1986. East. Samuel Soda's confirmed 1985 address at 1403 Southwest Emma Avenue is 5 house numbers west on the same block. So this is where Mark Allen lived. There was some weirdness with the address. I think there's an error on Google Maps. It could have been the house directly across the street. I was never able to resolve that completely. It's not that important. It just gives you situational awareness. And of course, like I said, the house that was there could have been rebuilt. The addresses could have been modified. It's been a long time. But that's what we think the house looked like. So 1409 Southwest Emma Avenue, Des Moines, Iowa. Google Street View, April 2024. Mark Allen's confirmed home. Google Maps shows this as 1408 in some views due to a data error. Correct address is 1409. Mark was last seen walking east from this house on March 29th, 1986. Soda's confirmed 1985 address at 1403 Southwest Emma Avenue is the adjacent property to the west. Okay. Yeah, this is really like less than walking distance. It's like, throw a baseball distance. 1403 Southwest Emma Avenue, Des Moines, Iowa. Google Street View, April 2024. Confirmed as Samuel Joseph Soda's resident in October 1985. Eugene Martin's paper pickup corner is at this same intersection. Mark Allen's home at 1409 Southwest Emma Avenue is the adjacent property east. Now here's the puzzler. We're going to find out more about Samuel Soda as we go, but this is a person that heavily injected themselves into this case. The fact that he lived this close, those are two things together that demand inquiry. But what we're going to find is that it gets much, much more damning. I'll just go ahead and tell you now. We're going to get to it all, but those are just the first two pieces of information that allow us to construct the most parsimonious narrative, requiring the fewest number of assumptions, and which has the greatest explanatory power. That's what we're doing here. Okay? Doesn't mean we know it was Samuel Soda. It means that given the information I have or I am in possession of today, it is the most likely narrative out of all competing narratives. That is a mathematical fact. Okay, Mark told his mother, Nancy, they were going to walk to a friend's house nearby to watch a movie and asked her to save him pizza. Nancy watched him walk down the sidewalk past the bushes outside their Southwest Emma Avenue home. He never arrived at his friend's house and has not been seen since. Maybe he did arrive at his house, but we'll get to that. I just wouldn't call him a friend. Police were initially told to wait 48 hours before filing a report, despite the Gosch law being in effect. A response that Nancy and others later attributed to institutional reluctance to acknowledge a third missing boy in Des Moines. Yeah, pretty ridiculous. You've got 3 boys just up and missing. Like the Starship Enterprise just beamed them up, all within, 3-4 years of each other. Right there in the same neighborhood. A baseball's throw down the road. Allen's connection to the Iowa cluster, Goldilocks narrative assessment. Allen's disappearance differs from the Gosch and Martin in 3 respects. Evening time rather than pre-dawn. No active paper route at the time. And no documented witness to adult contact. These divergences initially suggested a weaker connection. However, the Goldilocks narrative reaches a different conclusion when stalking behavior is incorporated. An organized predator, which the Iowa perpetrator demonstrably is, we can say was, does not select targets in the moment. The perpetrator identifies, surveys, and tracks specific victims over time before acting. Allen's confirmed paperboy status means they would have been observable through whatever mechanism the perpetrator used to identify the victims. The actual abduction event is the end of a process, not the beginning of one. Allen may have been targeted through their route and taken at the first opportunity the perpetrator judged safe, which happened to be a Saturday evening walk, not a Sunday morning delivery. This interpretation makes Allen's case more consistent with an organized stalking predator, not less. In other words, what I'm saying here, guys, is in the absence of all the other evidence, we would say that it looks a little more opportunistic, a little more impulsive, right? Because he just called him into his door right there in front of his house. Well, it depends. If he knew this boy, Mark Allen, and if he invited him in his home, then this is still very methodical. If he were Allen's friend down the street, just as Allen said, then it's not so impulsive after all. I'm going to go with this was not impulsive. It was thought out, probably considered long before this actually happened. Because this boy would have been seen many times on that street, being a boy and all. He's going to be out and about through the neighborhood. He's going to be seen many times. Goldilocks narrative finding, Allen connected to Iowa cluster. Under the stalking framework, Allen's methodological divergence is dissolved as evidence against connection. The victim profile, geographic overlap, 0.9 miles from Martin, 3.3 miles from Gosch. Paperboy status and complete evidentiary vacuum are consistent with the same Iowa perpetrator. Allen is assessed as probably connected, with the caveat that this conclusion requires the stalking prior to abduction inference, which is not independently evidenced, but is consistent with the organized offender profile established by the Gosch and Martin facts. Now, I'm aware of the circularity there. I'm not trying to say that this makes the case. I'm just saying that if that is in fact true, it at least fits with what we're saying, right? That we know that he was organized in the Gosch and Martin cases. So if he were to intercept Mark Allen on the street like that, then if he were his friend and already knew him, then yes, that also would be premeditated or organized. That's what I'm saying. The unidentified friend, analytical note. Mark told his mother they were going to a friend's house down the street. This is what we were just talking about. No friend has ever publicly come forward, probably because they've got a lot of felonies under their belt. The TGN evaluates this silence and reaches a specific high confidence inference. The complete absence of any friend coming forward across 40 years is consistent with two distinct and equally probable scenarios. They should be held as parallel hypotheses, neither privileged over the other. Scenario A, unannounced peer visit. Mark was heading to a peer friend's house, uninvited, intending to knock and see if they were around, which was entirely normal social behavior for a 13-year-old in 1986. The friend never knew Mark was coming. Mark was intercepted somewhere along the route between his home and that destination, either on the street, drawn into a vehicle, or drawn into a residence he knew along the way. The friend had no reason to come forward because nothing happened from their perspective. No knock, no visit, no Mark. So in other words, this scenario would be Mark went down the street to a friend's house, which was not the perpetrator, but the perpetrator intercepted him before he could get to that friend's house. That's one possibility. I mean, we can say, well, somebody did, there was a friend and they just chose not to come forward. I mean, that's possible. But which is more likely? That's what we're asking. It's more likely it's going to be one of these two. The other one being, Mark was heading directly to the perpetrator's house. He described it to Nancy as a friend's house, the natural way a 13-year-old would refer to a trusted adult acquaintance. The perpetrator's residence was the destination itself, not an interception point along the route. Mark arrived, entered willingly, and never left. Very disturbing stuff here. Mark arrived, entered willingly, and never left. Going to, an adult's home who should be trusted. No friend came forward because the intended destination was the perpetrator's home, not a peer's. Why both scenarios have equal probability? Both are fully consistent with all known facts. No friend came forward. Mark never arrived at any peer's house. No street incident was witnessed by anyone. The physical evidence required to distinguish between them is a single piece of information: the location of the perpetrator's residence relative to Mark's confirmed walking route. Sam Soda as the named candidate for scenario B. Yeah, that's right. Soda's documented Southwest Des Moines anchor places the Soda family corridor on or immediately adjacent to Mark's confirmed route. East on Southwest Emma Avenue, south on Southwest 9th Street, west of McKinley Avenue. Mark walked south on Southwest 9th Street, which is Soda's documented street corridor. If Soda lived on Southwest 9th between Emma and McKinley, Mark walked past Soda's house door. If Soda lived on McKinley itself, Mark was walking toward it. Primary source documentation confirms Soda lived at 1403 Southwest Emma Avenue in October 1985. That is directly confirmed from the county assessor's office, folks. So we know that is true. On the same block as the Allen home at 1409 Southwest Emma Avenue, Des Moines Register, October 10, 1985, page 21. Yeah, I think that's attesting this too. Okay, it was in the Des Moines Register, but it was also confirmed through the county assessor's office. Under scenario B, Mark Allen did not disappear on the way to a friend's house. He arrived at the perpetrator's house and walked in. This inference has a direct consequence for the abduction geography. If the destination was a short walk down Southwest Emma Avenue, a few houses, possibly a block or two at most, and Nancy watched Mark disappear past the bushes at the edge of their property, then the abduction window is extraordinarily tight. Mark was taken somewhere between the last visible point and his intended destination. On a residential street on Saturday evening in late March, that represents perhaps 2 or 4 minutes of walking time, and a distance almost certainly under 400 yards. How tragic. The indoor interception hypothesis. With that tight geographic and temporal window, the TGN identifies 2 abduction mechanisms: an open-air vehicle abduction, a man pulling alongside Mark in a car, carries meaningful witness exposure risk on a residential street on a Saturday evening. Neighbors outdoors, passing cars, people visible through windows. This is operationally riskier than the perpetrator's established pattern would suggest. The second mechanism, an indoor interception, eliminates nearly all of that risk. If a resident along Mark's short walk called out to him or invited him inside, Mark would have had no reason for alarm. The boy would have entered willingly. No struggle, no visible street incident, no witnesses. Critically, Nancy's sighting ended at the bushes at the edge of her property, the point at which Mark passed out of her line of sight entirely. She had no visibility beyond that point. From her doorstep, Mark had simply walked down the sidewalk and vanished past the hedge. Whether he entered a vehicle, a door, or continued on foot, she would not have seen it. This makes the indoor interception hypothesis neither more or less visible to her than any other mechanism. The bushes were the end of her observation regardless. The perpetrator's established profile, organized, patient, zero evidence across multiple incidents, is more consistent with the controlled environment of an indoor location than with a hasty open-air vehicle abduction on a populated residential street in evening hours. If Mark was killed inside a residence on or immediately adjacent to Southwest Emma Avenue, that residence was the crime scene. No body has ever been recovered. Indoor disposal infrastructure would explain what has never been explained by any other theory: how 3 victims across 4 years left absolutely no physical trace. So we have another, this is a good example too of a circularity thing. Neither one can be more likely than the other. We have to acknowledge that. So he could have just as likely been grabbed, hauled into a car. And the reason why is that someone could have seen him go in the house too. Or someone could have seen the car. They're not really that much different. You could argue it's slightly more likely he went into the house because of the fact that there wouldn't be any resistance, at least outside, where it could be heard, but that's pretty thin. So I'm going to go with these are equally probable. Okay. Let's see. The Southwest Emma Avenue residential investigation question. The indoor interception hypothesis generates a specific investigative question that has apparently never been publicly pursued. Who lived in the residences along Mark Allen's short walk on the evening of March 29, 19... Why in the hell was this never come up? Maybe it did, but I haven't found it. Did no one bother to look at this? The abduction zone is bounded on one end by the point Nancy last saw Mark, past the bushes at the Allen home, and on the other end by his probable intended destination, a friend's house down the street. Now, if we don't know where the friend's house is, we could do it this way. We could start at his house and move in the direction that we knew he was traveling. And we could put the probability in descending order. We could start with the next door house being the highest probability, the next one being the second highest probability, and so on. We'd go and we'd falsify each one of those. Well, he didn't stop at the first house because of X. He didn't stop at the second house because of Y. He didn't stop at the third house because of Z. But he could have stopped at the fourth house. That'd be the way I would attack that. But unfortunately, none of this was done. No one bothered to ask, like, who lives here? What do we know about him? Nothing. That's weird. I mean, it's entirely possible someone did. I'm just saying it's not readily publicly available, at least. This is a small number of residential properties. Yeah, likely fewer than a dozen addresses on Southwest Emma Avenue and any immediately adjacent cross streets within Mark's plausible walking radius. A background review of those residents, specifically any adult male occupants present in March 1986 with prior convictions for offenses against children, sexual misconduct, or any pattern consistent with the Iowa perpetrator profile, represents the most geographically constrained and therefore analytically tractable investigative lead in the entire Allen case. It is a lead that grows colder with each passing year as residents age, move, and die. But it is not yet fully foreclosed. The mystery friend. Nancy Allen's acquaintance. A detail surfaced in family interviews, specifically in Mark's brother Chris's account given to the Unfound podcast and the Missing in America, the First 24 Hours podcast episode, Into the Darkness, adds a significant dimension to the Allen case. According to Chris, before Nancy moved to the Southwest Emma Avenue house, she briefly lived with a young man who became important to Mark. This man was not described as a romantic boyfriend, but as a friend of Nancy's. Mark apparently liked him very much. The detail is analytically significant for multiple reasons. First, it establishes that Mark had a trusted adult male figure in his life, who was not a parent or teacher. Exactly the kind of person a 13-year-old boy might walk toward on a Saturday evening, without any alarm. Second, if this individual remained in the Southwest Des Moines area after Nancy moved to Southwest Emma Avenue, he would have been a plausible destination for Mark that evening. Third, Mark's strong positive feeling towards this man would make his compliance with any invitation or request entirely natural and unforced. And just to remind people who did not live at this time, for youngsters to go to someone's house and just come in their house, somebody that's much older, this was very common. This was not seen as odd at all. So there wouldn't be any, that would not likely be a factor here. Just FYI. The identity of this individual has not been established in any publicly accessible source. The existence of this person is confirmed through Chris Allen's interview on the Unfound podcast and the Missing in America, the First 24 Hours episode, Into the Darkness, in which Chris described the relationship, but the individual's name has not appeared in any index transcript or summary of those interviews. Whether the name was disclosed in the podcast audio is unknown from open sources. This person represents an unidentified investigative target who may never have been formally investigated by the Des Moines Police Department in 1986 or after. Sam Soda. Geographic convergence with the Allen case. The question of whether Sam Soda was the mystery man who lived briefly with Nancy Allen before the move to Southwest Emma Avenue cannot be answered on the current publicly available evidence. However, The geographic record establishes a convergence that has never been formally examined, as far as I know. Soda's documented Southwest Des Moines anchor is established through funeral records. His 2020 visitation was held at Hamilton's Southtown Funeral Home at 5400 Southwest 9th Street, and his Mass of Christian burial at St. Anthony Catholic Church, 15 Indianola Road. Both Southwest Des Moines landmarks. Families use the funeral home and parish closest to home. Typically. That'd be true for Episcopalians and Catholics, and this would have been a Catholic church. This places Soda's residential anchor firmly in the same Southwest Des Moines corridor as Southwest Emma Avenue. A forum commentator on the Mark Allen case thread stated that Soda lived on the same street as Mark Allen. This claim is now confirmed by primary source. Des Moines Register, October 10, 1985, page 21, which places Soda at 1403 Southwest Emma Avenue, 131 feet from the Allen home, during the active abduction window. Guys, the stacking of probabilities pointing in a defined direction is really mounting. That you would have this, I mean, Des Moines is not a tiny little town. Even back then, it wasn't a little, intersection in the middle of nowhere. So, yeah. If Soda was the mystery man Mark liked, a family acquaintance who had briefly shared a home with Nancy before the move to Southwest Emma Avenue and who remained nearby, the following scenario becomes structurally coherent under the Goldilocks narrative. Mark left the house on Easter Saturday evening, heading towards Soda's nearby address. He said they were going to a friend's house, using the vague language of a 13-year-old uses for a trusted adult acquaintance. He entered willingly. Soda, a former law enforcement officer with professional knowledge of evidence handling, left no physical trace. The friend never came forward, because from their perspective, nothing happened that evening. They never knew Mark was coming. And because the true destination was an adult the family knew. Now, this may be getting a little confusing. What I'm saying here is there's a couple things that could have happened. It could be that the perpetrator was the friend. Or it could be that there actually was a friend, right? Well, I think we mentioned that earlier, but just to clarify. So either he, either there was actually, if there had been an actual friend there who's not the perpetrator, then that friend would never know that he was coming to his house. Right, because he had been intercepted. So same thing. It's not going to get reported. His failure to show up at the friend's house, who is not the perpetrator, would not have been reported. Goldilocks narrative assessment, Soda-Allen geographic convergence. The convergence of 4 independent facts generates a high priority investigative lead. Soda's documented residential anchor is Southwest Des Moines. The same corridor is Southwest Emma Avenue. A forum commenter stated Soda lived on the same street as Mark Allen. Unconfirmed but geographically consistent with Soda's known anchor. Mark had a trusted adult male acquaintance, Nancy's friend, whose identity has never been publicly established and who may never have been formally investigated. Soda's professional profile, law enforcement background, investigative experience, local embedding is fully consistent with the Iowa perpetrator's evidentiary signature across all 3 cases. Together, these facts constitute a convergence warranting direct investigation of whether Soda was known to the Allen family before March 1986. This question may be answerable through interviews with Chris Allen, who is publicly and actively seeking answers about his brother's case. Satellite incidents, 1986 to 1989. Following the 3 confirmed Iowa abductions, a series of attempted abductions of registered paperboys occurred across the Des Moines area between 1986 and 1989. Iowa DCI formally investigated these incidents as potentially linked to the Gosch and Martin cases. They are analytically significant for 2 reasons. They established that the perpetrator remained active and locally embedded for years after Allen, and they contain the closest physical descriptions of the Iowa perpetrator available anywhere in the public record. So we mentioned Jim Pollock. Given how rare this behavior is in the first place, I would say it's more likely than not that, and we'll back this up as we get further along, but that this attack was carried out by Soda, and he failed. And that could be why he stopped. We need to look at... Ah, there it is. There it is. July. Yeah, it is after. It's after. So, yeah, this may be the problem here, dude. They may have, or guys, they may have, or he may have attempted another abduction where the boy escaped and that spooked him and he stopped doing it. To me, this just locks it up even better. This is just another little piece that fits in without having to make any assumptions at all. That's interesting. Grabbed by a man wearing a camouflage poncho. Pollock wrestled free and escaped to a neighbor's house. Reported being chased by a man approximately 6 weeks earlier on the same route, indicating pre-abduction surveillance across multiple weeks. No detailed physical description of the assailant in the public record. The camouflage poncho suggests military familiarity and premeditation. Occurred 103 days after Mark Allen disappeared. Sam Soda was in the Marine Corps. Served in Vietnam. We're going to get more into that in a minute. There's some interesting things there that indicate the possible presence of personality disorders, but we're going to get into that. They're just possible, not saying that's the case. Incident 2, Northwest Des Moines, 1986. Reported informally in an Iowa cold cases forum by a commenter whose friend was a paperboy on the northwest side of Des Moines around 1986. A man grabbed the boy who escaped by pulling his arm out of his shirt. Unconfirmed informal records. If accurate, it represents a second 1986 attempt beyond Pollock, extending the geographic radius of the active period. That one's really... Can't really comment on it. There's nothing there. Don't know. You see these other incidents. Now, a boy aged 10 to 13 delivering papers in Indianola. Warren County, the county whose plates appeared on the Gosch contact car, was chased by a man in a white van. Physical description not publicly available for the incident. The Fackler incident 4 weeks later involved a man matching the Indianola September description in both physical type and white vehicle. Fackler, November 1988. Mike Fackler, 10, register carrier, 3500 block of Fleur Drive, Des Moines. Less than 2 miles from Eugene Martin's home. At approximately 5 a.m., a heavy-set man in white jogging suit jumped from a white car and began chasing Fackler, who abandoned his bag and ran screaming to a neighbor's house. Police arrived at 5:15 a.m. Fackler's assailant was described as matching the suspect from the Indianola September 1988 incident in both physical type and vehicle color. 2 incidents, both involving white vehicles, within approximately 10 weeks. Okay, so the description here matches the Indianola incident. Okay. Unnamed 11-year-old registered carrier, Indianola. A white vehicle followed him the wrong way down a one-way street at 5:15 a.m. on a Saturday morning. Driver got out shouting threats and attempted to grab the boy, who escaped by slipping out of his sweatshirt. A torn shirt was left at the scene. Suspect physical description. Here we go, guys. A man in his 40s, approximately 6'2", with salt and pepper hair. This is the most specific physical description of the Iowa perpetrator in the entire public record. Iowa DCI formally joined the investigation, stating publicly they believed it was connected to the Gosch and Martin disappearances. Well, of course. Look at the age, in his 40s. Look at the date. You'll see there's a pattern. In the previous attempt, the man was believed to be in his 30s. And that was sometime before. The date is earlier. Let's see here. Do we still have that? I don't remember where that was, but let's see here. Boy, age. Yeah, it's in there though. Hopefully, you can back this up if you need to. But yeah, the date, the age descriptions match the dates for a single person. In other words. 6'2", salt and pepper hair. This is consistent with the description of Samuel Soda. How was this not noticed? How did nobody... I think the only one I know of who even suspected him was Noreen Gosch. All that effort and no one connected these dots, really? Melissa Gale, date uncertain. Melissa Gale 11, register carrier. Now we got our first female. Approached by a man in a blue car who gave orders. We're going to talk about the cars here in a minute, too. Details incomplete in the public record. The vehicle description, blue car, mirrors the Gosch contact vehicle in contrast with the white vehicles in the 88 to 89 cluster, suggesting either a vehicle change across the active period or a reversion to an earlier vehicle pattern. Vehicle pattern across the cluster. A clear shift in vehicle color is visible across the satellite incidents. The Gosch abduction involved blue vehicles. The Pollock attempt involved no confirmed vehicle. The 88-89 cluster involved white vehicles consistently. The Melissa Gale incident involved a blue car. This may reflect a vehicle change between operational periods, or may indicate two different vehicles owned or borrowed at different times. I think it's going to be the latter. We'll talk about why. Physical description convergent. These incidents provide usable physical descriptions. The Fackler suspect, 1988, was heavy set. That matches Sam Soda. He was heavy set. The Indiana, July 1989 suspect was in his 40s. That matches his age approximately. He would have been in his 40s. Approximately 6'2", that's his approximate height. Salt and pepper hair, and was described as consistent with the earlier Indianola reports. Soda was born March 14, 1942, making him 47 in July 89. So you see now what's going on here. The description, man in his 40s, large build, graying hair, is age consistent with Soda. His height is not documented in any public record, so the 6'2" estimate cannot be confirmed or excluded. We were able to analyze some photographs of Soda and determine that his height was very close to 6'2". We weren't able to confirm exactly how tall, but plus or minus 1 inch, 2 inches. He was in the right ballpark. DCI formal connection. Iowa DCI formally investigated the July 1989 Indianola incident as connected to Gosch and Martin. A threshold intervention that DCI does not make in routine attempted abductions. Those DCI investigative files have never been publicly released. The torn shirt from the July 1989 incident was retained as physical evidence. Whether any forensic work was done on it has never been publicly reported. Why not? Is it that the shirt just doesn't have the touch DNA on it anymore? I mean, touch DNA is very sparse. Very hard to lift. So I'm thinking they need to go back and look at some of this evidence and start using touch DNA. They might get multiple people, but it will narrow the list down. And I'm pretty sure the Sam Soda name is going to pop up in that DNA deal. The Pollock prior surveillance detail. The most analytically underappreciated element of the Pollock incident is that he reported being chased approximately 6 weeks earlier on the same route. Very organized. If accurate, this means the perpetrator identified Pollock, surveilled the route, returned to attempt to grab 6 weeks later, physically grabbed him and failed. This is exactly the stalking prior to abduction methodology the Goldilocks narrative has assessed as the Iowa perpetrator's operational profile across all three confirmed cases. The Pollock incident is not a random attack of opportunity. It is a failed, planned operation by a predator who had already surveilled the target across multiple weeks and who was still operating in West Des Moines 3 months after Mark Allen disappeared in South Des Moines. Geographic analysis, straight line distances. So we're going to show here the residences and their relative distances. You can pause here if you want to look at this more closely. But as you can see, we're showing how far apart all these people were. I probably should have put Sam Soda in there too. That's a good, maybe I should have done that. But if you look at a map, Sam Soda is kind of like in the middle of all this, except for these ones. This Walden, these are not part of the, those are not part of the cluster. But we got Martin, Allen, and Gosch. If you look at those three, they're pretty much right in between where Sam lived. Confirmed distance matrix, all GPS verified. Gosch abduction point. So here we go again. If you want to go look at this on maps, you've got the coordinates. Allen home. We're going to hit the Martin home. And cluster, 2-zone structure. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, and the guy that was convicted of those other attempts, he was in the Air Force, which is interesting. The Iowa cluster reveals an important internal structure when precise GPS coordinates are applied. Gosch and the Martin Allen pair are not equidistant from each other. Martin and Allen disappeared within 0.83 miles of each other in South Des Moines. Gosch disappeared 7.53 miles from the separate municipality of West Des Moines. The perpetrator operated in a specific home territory, the South Des Moines corridor, and traveled out of that territory for the Gosch abduction. SOTA anchor distances. All right. So, I did something wrong there. What did we do there? Hold on. Messed that up. Let me get back up here. No, that's not it. I don't know how this did that. Hold on. Bear with me, guys. Hold on just a second here. Okay, I'm going to pause a minute, guys. Okay, so we're back in the right spot. The Iowa cluster reveals an important internal structure when precise GPS coordinates are applied. Gosch and the Martin Allen pair are not equidistant from each other. Going back a little bit, but Martin and Allen disappeared within 0.83 miles of each other in South Des Moines. Gosch disappeared 7.53 miles away in the separate municipality of West Des Moines. The perpetrator operated in a specific home territory, the South Des Moines corridor, and traveled out of that territory for the Gosch abduction. So this is where we're looking at SOTA's location. We'll call it an anchor, but it's essentially his address. Hamilton, Southtown, Gosch abduction. See, it's showing you the distances here, and they all cluster around SOTA. Analytical implication. If SOTA was the Iowa perpetrator, SOTA's documented residential anchor is geometrically central to the Des Moines subcluster. The Gosch abduction required travel 7.5 miles from SOTA's home territory into West Des Moines, a single out-of-territory operation. Martin and Allen occurred on or within walking distance of SOTA's documented street. If Johnny Gosch was the first one, this actually makes more sense. He's not going to be so bold at first to do it right next to his house. He really did get bold, though. The Iowa subcluster is extraordinarily tight. All three victims disappeared within a 3.8-mile radius. Martin and Allen were separated by less than 1 mile. This geographic concentration, combined with a shared victim profile and evidentiary signature, is the strongest structural argument for a single Iowa perpetrator with deep knowledge of a specific local area. The Nebraska cluster, known offender baseline. The Nebraska cluster is a closed series. John Joseph Jubert IV was convicted of murdering Danny Joe Eberly, I don't know if I'm saying that right, and Christopher Walden, and was executed by Nebraska electric chair on July 17, 1996. He was also convicted of the August 22, 1982 murder of Richard Stetson in Portland, Maine. The Nebraska cases are retained in this analysis as an evidentiary baseline. Jubert's confirmed profile and methodology allow the Iowa perpetrator's unknown profile to be evaluated against a known reference point from the same geographic area. So just for reference, this is the other cluster. The following injury sequence. Now we're talking about Jubert's work, and what this is going to show. I'll let you pause this and read it, but what this is going to show you is how different his style was. This guy was very disorganized, very impulsive. I would say all of them are impulsive, but impulsive in a specific way here. Just absolutely horrible attack on these boys. This guy was really out there. Robert Ressler, FBI profile, application to Iowa cases. Robert Ressler, FBI Behavioral Science Unit, along with Dr. Ann Burgess, developed the behavioral profile used in the Nebraska investigation. The profile matched Jubert in every documented regard. Ressler's organized-disorganized classification framework and their work on the Jubert case are the primary FBI behavioral baselines against which the Iowa perpetrator's unknown profile can be evaluated. So again, organized versus disorganized, Jubert profile elements, Iowa perpetrator by contrast, Ressler's own final assessment. Just sort of reinforcing the fact that there were two operators here, at least. Probably more. At least two, though. The Iowa perpetrator profile, Goldilocks narrative construction. The following profile is constructed from the known facts of the Iowa cluster only. No speculation, no conspiracy theory, no uncorroborated testimony. It represents what the evidence demonstrates about the unknown Iowa perpetrator. Gender male. All witness descriptions of the adults seen near Gosch and Martin ascribed to male. Age range at Gosch, probably 25 to 45 based on witness descriptions of a clean-cut adult. Not described as elderly or very young. Build is stocky per Gosch witnesses, clean-cut per Martin witnesses. Victim selection. Targeted male paperboys aged 12 to 13 in a specific 3.8-mile Des Moines radius. Selection appears informed by route knowledge. Victim access mechanism. Most parsimonious explanation. Access to Des Moines Register carrier route information, names, routes, pickup locations, Sunday morning timing. Approach method, non-threatening, friendly conversation. Directions routes documented at Gosch scene. No force visible to bystanders. Organizational level, high. 3 abductions over 4 years, leaving 0 physical evidence, complete disposal of victims with no recovery, sustained operational security across entire active period. And I hate to say this one, but I think that this could mean, if he was this organized, it could mean that that he went to great lengths to destroy the remains. Unfortunately. It's possible. But I think DNA could resolve it. We'd still be able to identify them. Cooling off pattern, 18 to 24 months between confirmed incidents. Consistent with planned, deliberate predation rather than impulsive escalation. Yeah, I mean, this guy was planning this stuff out months in advance. Local knowledge, deep. All 3 victims taken within 3-mile radius, or 3.8 miles. Abduction sites suggest familiarity with Des Moines residential geography. Investigative awareness, high. Law enforcement background or equivalent knowledge of investigative procedures strongly inferred from complete evidentiary vacuum across multiple incidents. Continued activity. Satellite attempted abductions, 1986 to 89, suggests perpetrator remained in Des Moines area and was operationally active for at least 7 years after Gosch. Sole operator finding. The Goldilocks narrative applies causal parsimony to the question of perpetrator count. Every additional actor added to the theory requires an additional set of assumptions. Shared knowledge, shared motive, coordinated action, and sustained mutual silence across decades. A sole operator eliminates all of this inferential weight in one move. The Iowa evidence is entirely consistent with a single organized, locally embedded perpetrator operating alone. No evidence in the public record requires a multi-actor hypothesis. The Goldilocks narrative assesses the sole operator theory as the preferred explanation under causal parsimony. Persons of interest, Goldilocks narrative evaluation. The following individuals are named in the public evidentiary record in connection with the Iowa cluster. The Goldilocks narrative evaluates each against evidence economy, causal parsimony, and chronological integrity. This section will be expanded as case-by-case deep dives are completed. Paul Bonacci, Emilio, and Charlie Kerr are excluded from this analysis on grounds of source unreliability. All 3 figures enter the record exclusively through testimony from individuals with documented mental health concerns and credibility issues. Their exclusion does not damage the analytical framework. It sharpens it by removing inferential noise. Conspiracy-level theories involving organized trafficking networks, CIA involvement, or the Franklin Credit Union are similarly excluded as failing evidence economy. You see, it's really complicated when you pull this in, and requiring inferential infrastructure with no independent physical corroboration. The story offered by Bonacci was one of the most complicated, convoluted narratives that, would have given Occam a heart attack. Person of interest, Samuel Joseph Soda. Yes. March 14, 1942, Des Moines, Iowa. That's when he was born. He died in 2020. He was in the U.S. Marine Corps. He did 2 tours in Vietnam. He was a Marine recruiter after that. He was a deputy sheriff. He was a private investigator. Now, here's the weird thing. Notice the career trajectory. It seems to come in little blocks. This is consistent with someone who, could be organized, but also could have some impulsivity issues. It's kind of flighty. Marine recruiter, Buffalo, New York. Returned to Des Moines. Polk County deputy sheriff. Salesman. Returned to Des Moines in 1979. Private investigator. For 12 years. Now here's the weird part. He is the PI hired to work on Gosch case. Exposed Frank Sikora via videotape confession. Continuously embedded in investigation. Regarded as person of interest by Gosch family from 1984 onward. There is a pattern in Soda's behavior where he would tend to attack those who would point at him. This is very characteristic of personality disorders, but we'll keep going. Formal suspect status, person of interest, never formally charged, never publicly polygraphed, specifically regarding his own possible involvement. Current status, deceased. Prosecution permanently foreclosed. He wasn't given a polygraph, and that tells us that law enforcement didn't believe he was involved. That's all it tells us. Which would explain why it's not solved. Analytical assessment. Soda is the most analytically significant unresolved figure in the Iowa cluster. The case for his relevance rests on independently documentable facts, not on Noreen's testimony. Law enforcement background, Polk County Deputy Sheriff. Professional knowledge of investigative procedures, evidence handling, and case management. Maps directly onto the organized perpetrator's complete evidentiary vacuum. Impersonation of law enforcement. Multiple documented instances of Soda presenting himself in ways that blurred the line between PI and law enforcement, confusing witnesses and suspects. Another indication that something is a little off here. The Register's legal counsel specifically corrected Sikora's confusion about whether Soda was with the DCI. And when I keep saying, this suggests something's off, I'm not saying any one of these by themselves is enough to suggest that. I'm saying the totality of it as a whole is pointing at a personality disorder. And I'm trying to think what camp that might fall in. It could be, it's hard to say. Whether it's narcissistic, antisocial, histrionic, it's hard to say, but definitely because there's going to be a lack of empathy here for sure. Extensive traveling. His auto parts business involved extended travel periods with no fixed accountability for daily whereabouts. In other words, he had access to all kinds of cars, didn't he? Yes, he did. Des Moines embedding. Returned to Des Moines 1979, became PI 1980. His presence in the city predates Gosch's disappearance by 3 years. So, let me go back up here. It's just another thing that just occurred to me here. Interesting. It's funny when you go back and read this stuff. Buffalo, New York. Well. Buffalo, New York. I'm going to do some digging. Fascinating. Oh, that would make it rock solid. If I find similar incidents in and around Buffalo, New York, and that's not New York City. It's not that big of an area. I'm going to check that out. I might be updating this. If I don't update it, it means there's nothing to it. Because if there's something to that, I'm definitely going to update it. Okay. So, law enforcement background. Okay, yeah, we're going through this stuff. Extensive traveling. Investigator insertion pattern continuously embedded in the investigation of the very crimes the perpetrator may have committed. I mean, directly immersed. About as deep as you can get. A documented behavioral pattern in perpetrators who seek proximity to investigations for intelligence and psychological gratification. Departure behavior. After Noreen's 1986 press conference, naming suspects and indicating police were watching a local man, Soda left Des Moines. He later returned. This is very important, people. And it's interesting how parsimony, we don't have to assume any of this, right? None of these are assumptions. We know all this. And we can form a narrative involving Sam Soda that has outstanding explanatory power. He explains so many things. The access to all the vehicles, where he lived. It's just on and on and on. Soda's stated view after years of Johnny and the man was connected to the Des Moines Register. Under the sole operator hypothesis, this conclusion functions either as an honest investigating reasoning or as misdirection toward the Register while deflecting from himself. I think that's going to be the latter. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Goldilocks narrative assessment, Soda. The Goldilocks narrative's evidence economy and causal parsimony principles require that the simplest explanation, consistent with all available evidence, be treated as the highest probability explanation. So I'm going to say this a little more formally. We're talking about Occam's razor. What we're saying here is the Goldilocks narrative is the narrative that has the fewest number of unsupported assumptions, but that also has the greatest explanatory power. So it's just right. It's the Goldilocks answer, right? It's just right. It has a more enormous explanatory power, but it does it with very few facts, right? Because you can only use facts that are facts, right? Known facts, known quantities, because you don't want to make assumptions. So that's what the Goldilocks narrative is. Applied to the Iowa cluster, that explanation is Samuel Joseph Soda. No other named individual in the public record accounts for the full pattern without requiring additional explanatory infrastructure. The convergence is now extraordinary. A background search on Deborah Soda produced a documented address entry for 1403 Emma Avenue, Des Moines, Iowa, 131 feet from the estimated Allen home on the same block of the same street. This address is now confirmed by primary source, Des Moines Register, October 10, 1985, page 21. Soda resided at 1403 Southwest Emma Avenue in October 1985 between the Martin and Allen abductions. He predicted the Martin abduction with 4-parameter specificity 6 weeks in advance. He predicted the Martin abduction with 4-parameter specificity 6 weeks in advance. Timing, victim type, location, and week of the month. Now, we're accepting this as of value, but it is something that we need to try to get a better confirmation on, because did he really do that? Did he really make that prediction? I think he did. He inserted himself into the investigation of crimes he may have committed from the first weeks of the Gosch case. He exposed and produced the videotaped confession of a registered child abuser who could then be definitively cleared of the abductions, a sophisticated deflection operation. He inserted himself into the investigation of crimes he may have committed from the first weeks of the Gosch case. He exposed and produced the videotaped confession of a registered child abuser who could then be definitively cleared of the abductions, a sophisticated deflection operation. He left Des Moines immediately following Noreen's public naming of him in September 1986. He was independently identified in a photo lineup by Bonacci 9 years after the Gosch abduction. An identification treated with the evidentiary caution applied to all Bonacci testimony, but noted as consistent with the independent analytical findings of this document. The 1989 Indianola survivor described a man in his 40s matching Soda's age. His confirmed residential address is on Mark Allen's confirmed walking route. Soda cannot be charged. He died October 16th, 2020. And see, guys, this also raises another question. Here's another area where we could get some solid facts, potentially. Did Bonacci know Sam Soda before all this happened? Did they know each other? Did they ever live in the same town? Did they ever cross paths? Something to think about, because this would mean that Sam Soda is a what? Pedophile. Probably. He's a murderer, but he's probably a pedophile. Not much reason for him to murder a little boy out of, randomly out of nowhere, unless he's a pedophile. I mean, let's be real. So, yeah. That's an interesting question. The 1989 Indianola survivor described a man in his 40s matching Soda's age. His confirmed residential address, yes. Yes. But the evidentiary record assembled here, built entirely from publicly verifiable sources, without reliance on conspiracy frameworks or compromised witnesses, establishes Samuel Joseph Soda as the perpetrator of the Iowa Paperboy cluster, with a probability the Goldilocks narrative assesses as the highest achievable unavailable evidence. Physical corroboration, memorial video analysis. In connection with this analysis, Kelly Van Houten conducted a photographic examination of a memorial video slideshow composed for Samuel Joseph Soda's 2020 funeral. The slideshow contained photographs spanning his entire life from infancy through his eldest years, including images from his Vietnam-era service, family life across multiple decades, and images taken shortly before his October 2020 death. Where Soda appeared in the same images as his sons, their apparent ages were used to establish approximate date ranges for specific photographs. The analysis produced the following independently documented physical observations. Height estimate methodology. At least two images in the memorial slideshow showed Soda standing beside a window frame set to the same height as the standard interior door frame, a common American residential architectural feature with standard height of 6 foot 8 inches. In both images, the top of Soda's head cleared the top of the frame by approximately 6 inches. 80 inches minus 6 inches of clearance yields an estimated standing height of 74 inches, equal to 6 feet 2 inches. A separate image showing Soda beside what appeared to be a quarter horse produced a compatible height estimate. However, given uncertainty about the horse's exact breed and individual height, that reference was not used as primary evidence. The door height window frame is the cited methodology. A consistency check against the horse produced a compatible result. Estimated height, 6 foot 2 inches, plus or minus 1 inch. Height corroboration, 1989 Indianola survivor. In the July 1989 Indianola attempted abduction survivor described the assailant as approximately 6 foot 2. Iowa DCI formally connected the 1989 Indianola incidents to the Gosch and Martin disappearances. Soda's photographic height estimate of 6'2" derived independently from memorial video analysis using architectural scaling matches this description exactly. Build. Multiple images across different life stages confirm Soda as heavyset. This is consistent with the 1988 Fackler incident description of a heavyset suspect. Hair color timeline, full life arc. The memorial slideshow provided a complete photographic record from birth through late life, allowing construction of a confident hair color developmental timeline. In youth, Soda's hair appeared very dark brown to black. From approximately 30 to 40, gray began to appear around the ears. From approximately age 40 to 50, his hair was strongly salt and pepper. In later years, consistent with normal aging, the gray predominated. Hair color corroboration, 1989, Indianola survivor. The July 1989 Indianola survivor described the assailant as having salt and pepper hair. Soda was born on March 14th, 1942. In July 1989, he was 47 years old. Squarely within the 40 to 50 age range, identified from memorial video analysis as his strongly salt and pepper period. The match is exact. An independent witness describing an assailant in July 1989 and an independent photographic analysis of Soda's hair across his full life arc converge on the same hair color for the same age. Demeanor and appearance. Across the full photographic record, Soda projected a friendly, approachable demeanor. His general appearance was that of a non-threatening adult male. Does that sound familiar? This is analytically consistent with the Iowa cluster witness descriptions across all three cases. The directions ruse at Gosch involved a man who generated no alarm in multiple boys. The Martin contact was described as a friendly father-son conversation. Allen's disappearance involved voluntary compliance with no witnessed distress. The perpetrator's access mechanism across all three cases depended entirely on an ability to present as safe and approachable to a 12 or 13-year-old boy. Soda's documented appearance is consistent with that requirement. 4-parameter physical match. The 1989 Indianola survivor's description specified approximately 6'2", 40 to 45 years old, salt and pepper hair, heavy set. Soda's independently confirmed characteristics, approximately 6'2", age 47 in July 89. Strongly salt and pepper hair in the 40 to 50 range, heavy set build. All 4 parameters match. The probability of a 4-parameter coincidental match between an independent witness description and an innocent man's physical characteristics is negligible. I don't know about that. The probability of a 4-parameter coincidental match, no, that's not true. That should be corrected. What this does is it strengthens the explanatory power, is what this does, of the overall narrative. Because this is explaining more stuff, right? The TGN treats this 4-parameter convergence as significant, independent of physical corroboration. Note on analytical methodology. The physical analysis above was conducted by Kelly Van Houten through examination of a publicly available memorial video slideshow composed for Soda's 2020 funeral. Height was estimated by scaling against a door-to-height window frame. I think we're repeating ourselves here. Yeah, that's just a repeat of what we already said. Only the wicked flee when none pursueth. Let me read that again. Only the wicked flee when none pursueth. That is an old biblical quote. And you know, the funny thing about it is, when it comes to criminology, it's surprisingly common. When people commit crimes, they leave. Or if they think somebody's getting close to figuring it out, they leave. The book of Proverbs states, the wicked flee when no man pursueth, but the righteous are bold as a lion. The Goldilocks narrative applies this principle as an evidentiary standard. Flight from a named accusation in the absence of any legal compulsion is behavioral evidence. It does not establish guilt in a court of law. It establishes that the person who fled believed the accusation was dangerous, and that they had reason to believe it was dangerous because it was true. On September 16, 1986, Noreen Gosch held a press conference stating publicly that law enforcement knew the identity of the man who took her son and was watching him. She had spent the preceding 2 years recording Soda's prediction, reporting it to authorities, and assembling independent corroboration. The local man in Des Moines she was describing had a name, an address, and an operational history in the investigation of the very crimes he may have committed. Following that press conference, Samuel Soda left Des Moines. Only the wicked flee when none pursueth. What compelled the departure? Nothing legally. No arrest warrant was issued. No subpoena required his departure. No legal process of any kind compelled Soda to leave Des Moines in September 1986. He chose to leave. That choice was his own, made freely immediately after a public accusation. What an innocent man would do? Well, we can conjecture. An innocent man named publicly as a suspect in the abduction of 3 children has every structural incentive to remain. He would cooperate with authorities to demonstrate innocence. He would deny the accusation publicly. He would pursue defamation remedies against the accuser. He would present witnesses to his whereabouts on the relevant dates. He would do everything possible to remain visible, cooperative, and accountable. None of these things require legal compulsion. They require only that the accusation be false. True to some extent. There are people that will people with personality disorders will do this anyway, even when they are guilty. So, I mean, I don't know. What Soda did, he left. He did not publicly deny the accusation with specificity. He did not cooperate with a formal investigation of his own possible role. He did not pursue legal remedies against Noreen. He left Des Moines, and he returned only after the immediate pressure of the press conference had passed. The return. Soda's subsequent return to Des Moines does not diminish the analytical significance of the departure. A person who leaves under investigative pressure and returns, when that pressure subsides, is managing exposure, not demonstrating innocence. The departure was the response to the specific threat. The return was reestablishment of normal life once no arrest appeared imminent. Paul Bishop, the third naming of Soda. After Martin's disappearance in 1984, a man named Paul Bishop, who had been working with Noreen since shortly after the Gosch abduction, told Noreen that Soda was involved in the kidnapping and was in the West Des Moines area at the relevant time. Bishop subsequently visited Soda's office and was thrown out. Thrown out by Soda, to be clear. Soda then subpoenaed Bishop to testify before a federal grand jury. You see what I mean? This is indicative of a personality disorder. You attack anybody who might be exposing a secret. This is a classic NPD behavior. The TGN notes Bishop's identification of Soda with the evidentiary caution Bishop's own background requires. He was later convicted of child pornography. His claims about CIA connections are excluded from this analysis under source discipline, and his identification of Soda is known only through Noreen's account of what he told her. What can be assessed independently is Soda's behavioral response. He threw Bishop out of his office, then deployed legal process against him. This is the third documented instance of the deflection pattern after Sikora and Noreen's broader investigation, in which Soda identified a threat and used institutional mechanisms to neutralize it. The response is Soda's own conduct and does not depend on Bishop's credibility. And it gets better. Noreen stated that harassment against the Gosch family stopped after Soda departed and resumed when he returned. That's, again, the hallmark of a personality disorder. This claim is sourced solely from Noreen and has not been independently corroborated. The Goldilocks narrative notes it, but does not weigh it as confirmed. The departure and return are confirmed in multiple independent sources. The cessation of harassment is single-sourced, and is presented as Noreen's account only. Independent corroboration of the departure. The departure is documented in multiple independent sources. CavDef, drawing from contemporaneous accounts in Noreen's book, records it as a confirmed event. The AP Wire report from September 16, 1986, confirming the press conference is a matter of public record. The fact of the press conference and the named departure are independently established. The behavioral convergence. Goldilocks narrative conclusion. The flight of Samuel Soda in September 1986 is analyzed by the Goldilocks narrative in combination with Noreen's behavioral record, not in isolation. Two independent actors, two independent behavioral responses, both consistent with the same underlying fact. Noreen's behavior. She audiotaped the prediction before the crime occurred. She terminated Soda as her PI. She reported him to authorities and media before Martin disappeared. She held a public press conference at personal risk. She co-authored a signed opinion piece naming him. She pursued Iowa DMV records to corroborate Bonacci's vehicle description independently. Soda's behavior. He left Des Moines immediately after being named. He denied the prediction specifically rather than generally. He returned only after the immediate pressure subsided. He had previously neutralized two witnesses against him, Sikora through strategic deflection and Bishop through legal process. Neither actor's behavior requires the others to be explained. Each is convergent. Each is independently consistent with the same conclusion. Together they constitute a behavioral convergence that the Goldilocks narrative treats as among the strongest evidentiary elements in the entire Iowa cluster analysis. The wicked flee. The record shows that Sam Soda fled. Behavioral pattern, attacking the grieving as instrumental conduct. The Goldilocks narrative does not diagnose personality disorders. It notes behavioral patterns and evaluates their consistency with known profiles of organized predatory offenders. The forensic psychology literature on organized offenders, those who abduct, maintain operational security across multiple incidents, and evade detection for years, consistently identifies a cluster of personality characteristics: high behavioral control, low empathetic response, instrumental treatment of other people, and the use of institutional mechanisms as offensive weapons rather than defensive tools. Two specific behavioral patterns in the Soda record are consistent with this cluster. They are not conclusive, they are not diagnostic. They are additional data points in a behavioral profile that is already convergent across multiple independent lines. Their analytical weight is incremental, not determinative. But they belong in the record because any person who committed these crimes will almost certainly present this kind of personality organization. And Soda's documented conduct is consistent with it. Personality pattern, behavioral consistency with organized offender profile. You could pause this and read it, but essentially we're just showing the behaviors here to establish that there is a personality pattern in Soda that is unusual. Attacking Noreen Gosch through legal process. Attacking Sikora as instrumental conduct. Absence of distress across the entire record. I'm just going to make sure there's not anything in here I need to call out specifically. Yeah. Just pause and read that for more details. Now, here's what I'm going to read this one. This is really rich. Military metals fabrication, another indication of, or another behavior consistent with personality disorders, at least for a grown man. A lot of younger guys will do things like this, but around 30 years old or so, they stop doing stuff like this. The article that confirms Soda's 1985 residence as 1403 Southwest Emma Avenue exists because the Register was reporting on his fabrication of United States Marine Corps war medals, discovered when he was running for public office. The Marine Corps officially investigated and confirmed he had not earned the medals he claimed. Now this is a real tell. When confronted, Soda's documented response was that it was no big deal and that he was entitled to the medals anyway. He was entitled to the medals anyway. The public office context is analytically significant in itself. A man seeking elected office in 1985 is constructing a specific public identity: civic participant, community leader, man of institutional standing. The decorated Marine valor claim serves that construction directly. In Southwest Des Moines, in the mid-1980s, military service and combat distinction carried substantial social authority. A Vietnam veteran with medals was not merely respected. He was trusted, credible, and above the ordinary range of social suspicion. The fabrication was not vanity. Well, it could have been. It was infrastructure. Could have been both. Kelly Van Houten observes that while boys and young men sometimes fabricate stories of fame and valor as a developmental phase, this immaturity typically resolved by the age of 30. Soda was sustaining this lie into his 40s, and it was only exposed because external institutional scrutiny, triggered by a political candidacy, forced a formal verification. Left to itself, the lie would have continued indefinitely. The absence of internal constraint, the fact that no shame or conscience ended it from within, is the analytically significant element. Normal personality development produces internal inhibition of sustained identity fraud. The absence of that inhibition across decades, combined with the entitlement response when caught, is consistent with the personality organization that the Goldilocks narrative has documented throughout this section. The timing completes the picture. October 10, 1985. Eugene Martin had disappeared 14 months earlier. Mark Allen would disappear 5 months later. The article that places Soda on Allen's block was generated by an act of sustained institutional fraud. When exposed, produced not remorse, but reasserted entitlement. The Goldilocks narrative presents this as one more behavioral marker in a record that has no benign interpretation available to it. And this is just what I already said before. We're not going to diagnose anybody, but we just pointed out. The Bonacci private knowledge, what it establishes. This is just about Bonacci and his credibility. Yeah. The Goldilocks narrative does not adopt Paul Bonacci's account of the Gosch abduction. His overall credibility is compromised. His narrative is embedded in a conspiracy framework that official investigators found unsubstantiated. And the elaborate elements of his story, the farmhouse, the colonel, the trafficking network, cannot be relied upon under Goldilocks narrative source discipline, as well as parsimony. What cannot be dismissed on the same grounds is a narrower finding. Bonacci possessed private, non-public information about Johnny Gosch that had a limited number of possible sources. The scar on the tongue from a treehouse fall, the burn scar on the lower leg from a motorcycle tailpipe, the stammer when upset, and most significantly that Noreen had taken Johnny to yoga classes. Noreen stated explicitly she had never disclosed this to press or police. It was not investigatively relevant. It was not in any public record. It is the kind of detail a child would share in conversation, not something that could be researched or guessed. The Goldilocks narrative presents the following as a hypothesis, not a finding. Someone told Bonacci things that only the perpetrator could have known. Whether that person was Soda, someone connected to Soda, or someone else entirely. Private knowledge establishes one thing with reasonable confidence. Bonacci had access to a source with first-hand knowledge of what happened to Johnny Gosch after September 5, 1982. That source had spent time with Johnny, or was present when others did. Johnny spoke, children speak, and whatever Johnny said about his mother and their life together reached Bonacci through someone who was there. Now, the fact that, for this whole discussion, we're kind of painting a picture where Bonacci and Soda are pedophiles, which means they hang out in the same crowds. So it could have been direct from Bonacci, it could have been through another intermediary, but it's not that surprising that he would have picked up that information. Now that we know that a local man might have been involved. I mean, I think it's kind of obvious before, but, you just don't have enough of the story to go with that. I think we have a little bit more detail now. I think Bonacci was some kind of intermediary, and he was using that as a way to gain people. Hypothesis only, the private knowledge question. It does not assert he communicated. It doesn't assert the Bonacci account of the rule. It asserts only the following as a hypothesis. The private details Bonacci produced could not have come from public sources. Someone with direct knowledge of Johnny Gosch after his abduction shared those details with Bonacci. If the Iowa cluster analysis is correct, and Soda was the perpetrator, then Soda is the most parsimonious candidate for that source. That is true. That hypothesis, if it could be confirmed, would establish not merely that Soda abducted children, but that he was a pedophile, someone who held a child, spent time with that child, and subsequently shared knowledge of him with at least one other person. The distinction matters. The abduction evidence asks, who? The private knowledge hypothesis asks, what kind of person? Let's see here. Okay. Here we're going to falsify the Bonacci as a direct abduction participant. I'm just reading this real quick. Abduction only, not any subsequent interval. More or less the same thing we've just been talking about. Yeah, Bonacci's siblings reported to authorities that he was home at the time of Gosch's disappearance. He got this. This is second-hand information, if not, third or nth hand. The private knowledge is evidence of extended captivity. Goldilocks narrative concluding inference. The private details Bonacci demonstrated, a mother's yoga practice, childhood scars, a speech pattern under stress, are self-evidently the product of extended personal contact with Johnny Gosch after his abduction. Details of that specificity and domestic character are not extracted under duress in a short violent encounter. They are shared in the ordinary course of time spent together. A frightened child talking about home, about his mother, about the small facts of his life before. Their existence outside the Gosch family is therefore direct evidence that Johnny was held in captivity for an extended period following the disappearance on September 5, 1982. This inference requires no conspiracy framework and no reliance on any other element of Bonacci's broader account. It requires only the confirmed fact of the private knowledge itself and the elementary observation that a child shares details of this kind over time, not in a single encounter. Johnny Gosch was most likely alive and in someone's custody for a significant period after the morning he disappeared. And this could have something to do, too, with the long period between abductions that we were seeing here. It could have been for two reasons. It could have been because he kept these kids in captivity, but then also because he was so well organized, he needed a lot of time to plan the next one. So my honest guess, and I'm only taking a stab at this, but I would say those kids were probably kept for about a year. The Martin prediction, analytical assessment. The prediction of Eugene Martin's disappearance is the single most probabilistically significant element in the entire Iowa cluster record. Its analytical weight deserves precise treatment. The Martin prediction, analytical breakdown. What was predicted? A kidnapping would take place the second weekend of August 1984. The victim would be a paperboy. The location would be the south side of Des Moines. Because, hey, that's where he lived. 3 independent parameters specified in advance. Timing, second week of August. Victim type, paperboy. And geographic area, my house. Pretty much. When it was predicted, June 1984. Approximately 6 to 8 weeks before Martin disappeared on August 12th, 1984. What actually happened? Eugene Martin disappeared on Sunday, August 12th, 1984. The second Sunday of August. He was a paperboy. He was from the south side of Des Moines, near Soda's house. All 3 specified parameters matched exactly. Probabilistic significance. This is not a vague or general prediction that could be retrofitted to multiple outcomes. 4 independent parameters were specified in advance. Month, week, within the month, victim type, and geographic area within a city. The probability of all 4 matching by random chance is negligible. The prediction either did not occur as described, was fabricated after the fact, or the person who made it had foreknowledge of a planned abduction. I'm going to go with the latter. The 2 Goldilocks narrative consistent explanations. If the prediction occurred as stated, the Goldilocks narrative admits 2 explanations. First, the source had been told about a planned abduction by someone with direct knowledge of it, meaning the source was connected to the perpetrator. Second, the source was the perpetrator, sharing operational intelligence about a crime they were planning, framed as investigative insight to demonstrate value and create a deflection record. The second explanation is more parsimonious under causal parsimony. Because you're having to assume that there's a third party in there, or there's a second party. There's this extra person or persons. It could be any number of people, but you're having to assume additional people. Simple explanation is it was just Soda. The deflection function, a perpetrator who warned a victim's family about an impending abduction. Yeah, because those happen all the time. And then reported that warning to law enforcement, would have created a documented record of having tried to prevent the crime. If the abduction was later connected to them, that record would function as evidence of innocence. The prediction's value as a deflection mechanism is fully consistent with the organized, procedurally sophisticated profile of the Iowa perpetrator. The prediction as plan announcement. If Martin delivered newspapers to Soda's confirmed address at 1403 Southwest Emma Avenue, the prediction to Noreen in June 1984 was not intelligence gathered from criminal contacts. It was an announcement of a plan already formed. Soda had selected his target through weeks or months of observation from a fixed residential location. The same stationary observation mechanism established for the Allen abduction. He knew Martin's face, his Sunday timing, which mornings he came alone, the 4-parameter specificity, timing, victim type, location, week of month, is not the profile of a man who heard something from criminal sources. It is the profile of a man who had been watching a specific boy deliver his newspaper every Sunday morning and had selected the date, Soda's own words in October 1984. This is a man who is in a position where he knows all the routes and all the carriers. Describe the mechanism precisely. He was describing himself. This is another example of where, a lot of times the simplest interpretation of what people say is that they were just telling the truth. That actually is the more likely, conclusion. If you just randomly pick a statement out of nowhere and you say, hey, well, it's more likely they're telling the truth. This was probably truthful. He described this person accurately because it was him. The investigative record of Noreen Gosch. The Goldilocks narrative source discipline principles have required that specific unverified claims not be used as primary evidence in this analysis. This is an analytical necessity, not a judgment on the person making those claims. The record considered as a whole warrants a direct statement of what Noreen Gosch got right. Noreen identified Sam Soda as a suspect in the disappearance of her son from 1982 onward. Within the first years of the investigation, before Eugene Martin disappeared, before Mark Allen disappeared, and before any of the analytical work in this document was assembled. She reported the Martin prediction to law enforcement in June 1984 and was ignored. She held a press conference on September 16, 1986, publicly naming Soda as a suspect. At a time when authorities had produced nothing in 4 years of investigation across 3 disappearances. Following that press conference, Soda left Des Moines. I also wonder, too, if he didn't threaten to sue her or something. There's something weird about all that. Well, yeah, I would think that she would have continued to pursue this guy. She knew what happened. I think she actually had it right. So this whole thing with Bonacci and all that stuff, I think that served to keep public tension active. And that could work as a way of bringing attention to Sam Soda. An indirect way of doing it without getting sued. I'm not sure about that. I don't know. I mean, that's just something that occurred to me. I'm not saying that's true. It's just an aside. The Goldilocks narrative's independent geographic, behavioral, and evidentiary analysis, constructed entirely from verifiable public records, without reliance on her testimony, has arrived at exactly the same conclusion she reached 4 decades ago. Let me read that again. The Goldilocks narrative's independent geographic, behavioral, and evidentiary analysis, constructed entirely from verifiable public records without reliance on her testimony, has arrived at exactly the same conclusion she reached 4 decades ago. That Sam Soda is the highest plausibility named individual in the Iowa cluster. She was right. She was ignored, and the 3 boys were never found. The record should reflect this. Whatever the evidentiary status of specific claims that cannot be independently verified, the core of Noreen Gosch's investigative conclusion was correct. She identified the right person at the right time through a combination of direct observation of Soda's behavior and information she received from multiple sources. She took that conclusion public at significant personal cost. She was dismissed by law enforcement and by much of the public record. The Goldilocks narrative analysis of this case, assembled 40 years later from independent sources, corroborates her central identification. The families of Johnny Gosch, Eugene Martin, and Mark Allen deserve to have that acknowledgement stated plainly in any serious analytical document on this cluster. Behavioral escalation hypothesis. When the three Iowa abductions are arranged chronologically and plotted against the soda anchor geography, a behavioral progression emerges that is consistent with the organized offender literature on predatory escalation. The Goldilocks narrative evaluates this progression not as speculation, but as a pattern that the confirmed geographic data generates independently. 1982 Gosch, first operation, out of home territory, 7.53 miles from soda anchor. Different municipality, perpetrator identified through register route intelligence, but operated away from their immediate neighborhood, minimizing proximity risk. Approach required a directions ruse at the paper drop. Multiple witness contacts. A vehicle was used. Operationally the most complex of the three incidents. Consistent with a first act by a perpetrator who is careful and uncertain about operating close to home. 18 to 22 month gap, cooling off period. Could have been that. I think it could have just been, in fact, well, they're probably equal. Well, I don't know about that, but it could have been a cooling off period, or it could have been a period of captivity followed by more planning for the next one. No confirmed incidents in the Iowa cluster, consistent with organized offender pattern of deliberate pacing. Martin, second operation, home territory. Now we're in home territory. He's a little spooked now. 0.59 miles from soda anchor. Martin's paper route ran through the same southwest Des Moines corridor as the soda anchor. A perpetrator living on or near Southwest 9th Street would have had Martin pass their location on multiple Sunday mornings before acting. Witnesses described as friendly conversation, no ruse, no vehicle drama, no observable coercion. Significantly cleaner and more confident than the Gosch operation. Consistent with a perpetrator who has identified and watched a local target over an extended surveillance period and acts when operationally ready. Okay. And again, the same pattern just goes, this is either a cooling off period or it's captivity with a follow-up of planning. And then we're going to have third operations, near zero distance, 0.24 miles from soda. So he gets closer and closer. He gets bolder and bolder. Mark was confirmed register paperboy whose route also ran through the South Des Moines corridor. He was not working when he disappeared. They were making an evening social visit. If Soda was Nancy Allen's mystery male friend, whom Mark knew and trusted, no surveillance was required at all. Mark may have walked voluntarily to the perpetrator's door. This is the most operationally efficient of the three incidents. No vehicle approach, no public contact, no witnesses, no street exposure beyond Mark's short walk from home. The progression moves in one direction across all three dimensions, decreasing operational distance from home, decreasing operational complexity, and decreasing reliance on active targeting mechanisms. This is precisely the trajectory of an organized offender literature predicts as a predator gains confidence across multiple successful incidents. This is precisely the trajectory the organized offender literature predicts as a predator gains confidence across multiple successful incidents. Each success reduces perceived risk and increases willingness to act closer to home. Vehicle evidence, the Ford Fairmont and the station wagon. The Gosch abduction scene produced two distinct vehicle descriptions from multiple independent witnesses. Police formally sought both vehicles. Neither was ever located. So you could pause this and look at the vehicles that were seen in the evidence statements here. Bonacci did describe a station wagon. Yeah. It was additionally reported that the Iowa DMV confirmed Soda owned a vehicle matching this description. So, it's interesting. The anonymous composite poster. Yeah, I'm not really sure what to make of this one. You can check that out if you want. I'm not going to do much with it. Ford Fairmont station wagon variant. Both sedan and station wagon configurations. Yeah. But here's where it gets interesting. Soda operated his own auto parts store in Kansas City with extensive travel throughout the region before returning to Des Moines in 1979. Auto parts trade networks in the Midwest involved deep personal connections to dealers, fleet operators, and body shops across multiple counties. The obituary states Soda returned to Des Moines in 1979 and continued his career as a salesman before becoming a PI in 1980. The one-year gap and the continued language suggest the transition was gradual. He may have been maintaining his auto trade network while simultaneously beginning PI work. Vehicle investigation question. The silver Ford Fairmont seen speeding from the Gosch wagon site, station wagon, and Bonacci's station wagon driven by Sam are potentially the same vehicle. It was reported that Iowa DMV confirmed Soda owned a matching vehicle. Unverifiable through open public records, but formally investigatable through an Iowa DOT records request. If Soda's 1982 registration includes a silver Ford Fairmont or station wagon, the convergent with scene witness descriptions would be among the most significant physical linkages in this case. And then there's the barred vehicle hypothesis. A significant analytical question is why the Gosch abduction required vehicles at the scene while the Martin and Allen operations left no vehicle witness accounts at all. One hypothesis that resolves this elegantly is that Soda did not use a registered vehicle at Gosch, but borrowed one through his automotive trade connections. Soda spent years running his own auto parts store in Kansas City with extensive travel throughout the region before returning to Des Moines in 1979. Well, this is just the same thing we're reading above. He had ready access to cars, guys. He knew how to do that. He had access to cars that could never really be traceable to him, per se. A good bit of investigatory work would be required to even make that connection. And you'd have to already know what you're looking for. This hypothesis also explains the operational shift for Martin and Allen. Yeah. Operating within walking distance of their own residence on the South Des Moines corridor required none of that. Yeah. Yep. Borrowed vehicle hypothesis. Let's see. Yeah, this is more of what I was just saying. Why no vehicle registered to Soda was ever identified despite an active search for the blue car and silver Fairmont. Why the Iowa DMV match reported for a Soda vehicle may refer to a different vehicle than those seen at the scene. And why the Martin and Allen operations left no vehicle evidence, because proximity to his residence made a vehicle unnecessary. Right? He was able to remove the vehicle from the equation. I mean, this is a very good operator, very organized. So to make it, someone reports a car at the Gosch kidnapping. So what does he do on the next one? He doesn't use a car. And this guy is learning. It's really weird. A single organized perpetrator who borrowed a vehicle for a distant first operation, then operated on foot for 2 subsequent home territory operations. Requires fewer inferential steps than any multi-actor alternative. Just seeing if this is anything more than what we've already said. The network was cooling continuously across precisely the period when he's alone. Yeah, this is more the same thing. The Johnny Gosch Law. Postulate under examination. The enactment of the Johnny Gosch Law on July 1st, 1984, 43 days before the Martin abduction, materially changed the operational risk profile of vehicle-based child abductions in Iowa. And a former law enforcement officer would have recognized and responded to that change immediately. So here's more reason why he could have dropped the cars. The law's primary provision was elimination of the 72-hour waiting period, mandating immediate police involvement when a child was reported missing. Right? So he really doesn't want to use a car now because he's got to find a way to get the kid off the street much quicker. Right? But the documented police response to Martin's disappearance reveals what immediate meant in operational practice. All points bulletins broadcast to every patrol unit in the region. Roadblocks established within the hour. Neighborhood canvassing begun within the hour. The FBI involvement by that afternoon. I mean, you could see that this would have been very risky for him to continue using a car. Yep. Okay. Route knowledge as the access mechanism. So... I'm reading this real quick, but he was also describing it. I think exactly. Yeah. More corroboration here, guys. More explanatory power, more corroboration. The unidentified registered employee, open investigative target, the stationary location postulate. Yeah. More of the same. We're saying that he went to this different mode. Sunday pre-dawn, paper route, fixed pickup location, known timing. None of that. Alternative. The perpetrator was not in a vehicle and did not need to predict Mark's departure. He was in a fixed residential location within Mark's short walking radius. From that location, he had observed neighborhood movement over time. He did not need to know Mark was coming. Either Mark came to him voluntarily, walking toward a known address, or Mark passed close enough to that location that an invitation from a doorway required no advance knowledge of Mark's plans. Yeah. The house as crime scene. Yeah, and this just reinforces why no evidence was found. And the geographic constraint. Here's some pictures of that area. This is the location of the Martin abduction, I believe. Let's see. Yes, let's see. Yeah, the following 4 images form a complete 360-degree photographic survey of the intersection of Highview Drive and Southwest 12th Street, Des Moines. The corner where Eugene Martin collected his newspapers and where witnesses last saw him on August 12, 1984. This is also the intersection at which Mark Allen's home, 1409 Southwest Emma Avenue, and Samuel Soda's confirmed 1985 residence are located. You can see here, same intersection, different view. This is sort of a 360 panorama. We start here, turn here, look this way, then we're going to look this way. We're going, if we were standing there, we'd be turning clockwise. Here's another shot. Yeah. We've already said this. Yep. An auto parts trade network based in South Des Moines. Overlap, career timeline analysis. Yeah. Okay, so a lot of this stuff is repeating some of the same stuff, more or less. You can pause and read if you want, but I'm not going to belabor points already made. Access channels and the trust mechanism. How did the boys know the perpetrator? Actually, access channels and the trust mechanism. How did the boys... Yeah. The victims knew their perpetrator or believed they had a legitimate reason to trust him. Yeah, access channels, Des Moines Register Route Network, Boy Scouts, personal family connection, flying. This guy had a pilot's license, soda. So there was a lot of opportunities here. Guns, he was firearms was his hobby. Marine Corps Veterans Network, PI work. So he is the kind of guy that could have come off as completely harmless. I think that's pretty much the gist of it. Timing divergence, paranoia, and the grooming hypothesis. The grooming hypothesis? Let me see what this was. Oh, yeah, I see. Yeah, if he had been contacted through any of those channels, he could have been groomed prior to that. That's a possibility, too. Really, I don't know that these things really make much difference to the conclusion. Person of interest, Wilbur Millhouse. Oh, yeah, they had problems with pedophilia at the newspaper, too. So lots of people here that Soda could blackmail. Probably. Who knows? Possibility. Okay. So here we are. I think we're getting to, this is where we wrap it all up, I believe. Let me see. Register employees. Well, maybe not. Wait. Sole organized Iowa perpetrator with local Des Moines knowledge and register access high. Yeah. Soda as sole Iowa perpetrator high. Iowa and Nebraska cases connected, falsified. Organized trafficking network theory excluded. Unrelated perpetrators, 3 Iowa cases independent, very low. Mark Allen unrelated to Gosch Martin, low. Yeah, there were a lot of people that did. There were a lot of actors involved here who would have had access to children, who were tied to pedophilia. So there's all sorts of, once you start peeling back layers in a community, you start finding all kinds of weird stuff like that. Secor exposure, deflection as behavioral pattern. Yeah, here's more of Soda's pattern of going. I mentioned that already. Frank Secor, he went after Secora to control him. Yep. Soda address history. Yeah, so here's a address history. Let's see here. You can read this if you want. It's just details, but it's the same conclusion. As before, confirmed as Soda's PI office. Okay, that's his PI office address, which could be relevant in the future. Somebody needs to start digging up basements. That's what needs to happen here. Yeah, it's just dumb. Dumb. Yeah. So this is showing all the addresses associated with him. He had quite a few. He ran businesses. He had a large property tract outside of Des Moines somewhere. I wonder if that's, let's see. Is that in here? Might be that one. Oh, no, it's Lorimor. That's it. Lorimor, Iowa. Rural Union County. Yep. Population approximately 300. So he had a lot. All of these properties need to be dug up. They need cadaver dogs, which I don't know if that'll work now, but they definitely need to see if they can find any human remains out there. This is a picture of the house that Sam Soda was living in when he died. 24. 1200 Southwest Emma Avenue, Des Moines. Confirmed Soda family property, built 1991, purchased 2005. American and Marine Corps flags displayed in front yard. Some of the addresses, yeah, more about these addresses. I think we've already said that. You're welcome to read that if you want. Yeah, there was somebody that said that somebody else had known this before, but they didn't get much coverage. It was like a one-line sentence on some, like, you know, on, oh gosh, some discussion board somewhere. Open investigative questioning. Yeah, this is just all of the properties. And did Martin, that's another thing too, did Martin deliver to 14? Did Martin deliver to Soda? That would be even more parsimonious now, wouldn't it? You just have the guy come straight to his house. That's really clean. They live so close together, it's not inconceivable. We know that won't be true for Mark, though, because he left the house. But still, for Martin, that's definitely a possibility. Okay, residence address partially resolved. Yeah, they moved around a lot, which is also flighty. That's another thing about this. This guy just really shakes out to be exactly what the narrative suggests he is. Recommended investigative actions. Open records. Mark Allen. Yeah, we need to, somebody needs to start doing this. I think this is solvable. I do. I just don't understand why they're not out there digging up properties right now. That's insane to me. It's been how long? 40 years or something? Yeah, this is how you get, you submit stuff. Open records requests and things like that if you're interested. You could reach out to Noreen Gosch. I don't know how you'd do that, but she is out in the public still. She's a custodian of the audio. Yeah, need that recording. Yeah, that's really needed. Chris Allen, direct outreach, forensic search for all Soda associated properties. Yep. Faded Out podcast on the search for remains. Yeah, the Lorimer, Iowa rural properties need to be looked at. Held continuously from the 1990s through 2018. In fact, the fact that that was held that consistently, because his property ownerships before were like really spotty. Everything about him was impulsive and flighty as far as these just general behaviors. So I would say this suggests to me that the remains are there. The remains are at Lorimer, Iowa. Yeah. It's the one property he's going to want to keep in his name. He does not want anybody finding anything. Yeah. Ground penetrating radar surveys is what's needed. Whew. I think that's going to be the end of it there. So, guys, that's it. If you want to see more of this, just let me know. It was a pretty long one, so I didn't want to repeat myself. I just tried to keep it short. If you want a copy of the document, you can shoot a message to me, and I will send it to you. Alrighty, everyone. That's it for this one, and we'll see you on the next one. Talk to you soon.